All right, I'm ready to roll. So I'm not a big fan of spending a lot of time on my history and my bio and everything I've accomplished in the Vegfest program. If you want to look at my bio, feel free to check it out. Paleo diet. So if somebody's eating a typical American diet and they switch to eating a paleo diet, do you think that they will maybe lose weight, improve their health a little bit? Raise your hand if you think they will. I do. But it's not surprising, right? So does that every other diet in existence will do that. I'm bored with that. I'm bored with short-term diets. I'm bored with short-term weight loss and short-term health improvements. I'm a little bit more interested in all the other repercussions that this diet is going to have. I care about long-term health. I care about long-term weight. I care about farmers. I care about animals. I care about soil, water, everything else. I care about all these other things that we often neglect when we think of our own specific dietary choice. So we're going to talk about if paleo eating should guide our food choices in the 21st century. So long ago in some faraway land, claims the Paleo Theory, notice the Flintstone backdrop. Nutrition was simple. Humans ate mostly meat and vegetables. Our ancestors roamed the land, in tune with their bodies and the environment. No grains or beans were consumed. Everyone was healthy, fit, lean, muscular, with no disease or dental limitations. Claims the Paleo Theory. Is that even accurate? Let's talk about that today. Now, first off, I have to acknowledge that not every paleo eater eats the same. I don't know how many people in here have eaten a paleo diet or have friends who've eaten a paleo diet, but the paleo diet can actually be highly plant-based, and I think that's important to acknowledge. So let me show you what I mean. So a paleo plate can look like this. It is possible. So starting on the right side of the plate, half the plate can be made up of a variety of vegetables. 1/8 of the plate could be fat-dense foods like nuts, seeds, avocado, olives, coconut. 1/8 of the plate could be starches and fruits like sweet potatoes and plantains, fruits. The only part that is animal-based would be maybe 1/4 of the plate, like wild meats and eggs. But as you can see, 75% of the plate is made up of plants. So how does that compare to a vegan plate? Well, 75% is exactly the same. It's identical. The only difference lies in those protein-dense foods. So that 1/4 of the plate, a vegan eater would get their protein from beans, legumes, things like that. So it is possible to eat more of a plant-based paleo diet. Because oftentimes, a new paleo eater might just use it as a justification to go eat a lot of meat, not really paying attention to what their plate is made up of. So in general, and that's with every diet. I mean, if somebody says, I eat a vegan diet, you don't know what they're eating, right? They could eat chips all day, they could eat kale all day, you don't know. So when a paleo eater says, I eat paleo, what do you eat? All meat? Do you eat a lot of vegetables? In general, the paleo diet gives these guidelines. It's made up of vegetables, wild meats, eggs, tart fruits, so fruits with less sugar, nuts, and more unprocessed oils like coconut and olive oil. Now, what's not on the paleo diet? Refined and processed foods, sugars, candy bars, dairy, sweet fruits, fruit juices, grains, beans, and processed vegetable oils. Basically, paleo eaters believe we should abandon modern agriculture and go back to eating like we did in the Paleolithic times, over 10,000 years ago. Two questions to consider related to that. Why 10,000 years ago? Have we stopped evolving for the last 10,000 years? The other question, it's an interesting idea to say, all right, if it wasn't around 10,000 years ago, I'm not going to use it today. That's interesting in theory, but what if we applied that to other areas of our lives? Starting tomorrow, I'm not going to use anything that wasn't around 10,000 years ago. Goodbye computer, goodbye cell phone, goodbye modern plumbing, goodbye MRI machines, prescription medications. There's a lot of things that have been developed in the last 10,000 years. Now, if somebody says, okay, I eat a paleo diet, do they really eat a paleo diet? Are the foods that are around today the same foods that were around in Paleolithic times? No. The vegetables and fruits we have, we've sown seeds from plants with the most desirable traits. We choose vegetables and fruits that are plump and sweet and juicy with few toxins. The animals we breed today are bred to produce as much meat, milk, and eggs as possible. Nothing is the same as it was 10,000 years ago. True paleo food doesn't exist. Now here's the big question, is paleo nutritionally sound? US News and World Report gets together each year and they bring together experts and they rank different diets. So this year they brought together 22 diet experts and they ranked 28 popular diet plans. How do you think paleo fared? Last. Paleo ranked dead last of 28 diets. Vegan diet was 17th, vegetarian diet was 11th, flexitarian was 6th, number 1 was a DASH diet. Are we familiar with a DASH diet? Okay, it's kind of anticlimactic. I wouldn't bother looking it up. So one study using a paleo diet had 20 volunteers. 14 of these volunteers completed all 3 weeks on the paleo diet, so that means there was a 30% dropout rate. They had a 5-pound weight loss, a 0.2-inch decrease in waist girth. Keep in mind that these folks were not overweight to begin with. And blood calcium levels slightly dropped. Nothing too remarkable in this study. Now, I do think it's important to point out that there are a few things about the paleo diet that have some evidence behind them, some things that I like about the paleo diet. Number 1, fewer processed foods. The American diet is built around processed foods. So if somebody says, all right, I'm going to try to eliminate processed foods or eat fewer processed foods, that's a step in the right direction. Processed foods are very, very calorie dense, and they're very, very, very non-nutrient dense. And they're easy to overeat. A lot of people overeat processed foods. It can lead to weight problems. Focusing more on vegetables, fruits, lean proteins, nuts, and seeds. These are the most nutritious whole foods. They lead to better health, better weight status. It's a great idea. Fewer dairy products. Dairy is a leading source of saturated fat in the American diet, thanks to our escalating consumption of cheese and ice cream. Every nutrient we get in dairy, we can get in other foods. We don't have to eat dairy. And most dairy farming operations are reprehensible. So it's a good idea, eat fewer dairy products. There's an emphasis on free-range, pasture-raised, wild and completely grass-fed animal products. Let me explain myself here before I get run out of the building. I work with a lot of clients who eat animal products, and so if a client comes up to me and says, Ryan, I'm having meat for dinner tonight. My choices are I can run down to Walmart and I can get a pack of ground beef that's 99 cents per pound, or I can connect with one of my local farmers and get some pasture-raised meat. What do you recommend? Between those two choices, I'm going to go with pasture-raised. Obviously, in my ideal world, I'm hoping for option C, lentils, or a black bean quinoa salad. Fantastic. If that's not an option, though, I think this is a better option. And there's increased awareness of food origins. Many paleo eaters, like vegan eaters, start to just become aware of where food comes from. They start to eat seasonally and locally and connect with farmers and buy organic and just learn about food. So I think that's important for our entire country, to just have a greater awareness of food origins. Many paleo eaters start to take on this idea of evolutionary fitness. I like this as well. They start to get back into body weight exercises, body weight movements. They try to do body weight exercises. This can help to build better movement patterns. So they run better, they move better. This prevents injuries. This works muscles that they might not work in a gym on a machine. So I like this idea, evolutionary fitness. Now, what about the guidance to completely eliminate beans and grains? I think that is misguided for one reason alone, triage. Everybody familiar with the term triage? It's often used in emergency room settings. It's about dealing with the most urgent issue first. So here's what I mean for people that might not be familiar with it. Two guys come into the emergency room. One guy just severed off his leg with a chainsaw. One guy has a splinter in his finger. Time to triage. What's the most urgent issue? Severed leg, right? So you can apply this idea to your nutrition as well. So do some nutrition triage. Let's look at our consumption statistics in America for beans versus meat. Do some nutritional triage here. Per person, per year in America, we consume 7.5 pounds of beans. So per person per year, 7.5 pounds of beans. Per person per year, we consume 171 pounds of meat. Triage. Americans are not overeating lentils. Meat is our severed leg. Beans, that's the splinter in our finger. So we got to do some nutrition triage here. Other thing I like about legumes is that they're the two leading food crops in world agriculture. They're grown in 163 countries worldwide, every continent except Antarctica. They're critical in the farming cycle. So farmers will plant legumes to help fix nitrogen in the soil. That helps other vegetables and fruits to grow without using loads of artificial fertilizers. Now, somebody might say, all right, that's great, Ryan, interesting. Triage, that's a cute theory. But beans and grains, they weren't around in Paleolithic times, so I'm not going to eat them. Well, is that accurate? According to the latest data, no. Beans and grains were around in Paleolithic times. They were around over 10,000 years ago, and people did consume them. Humans are well adapted to consuming them. Some of the healthiest cultures around the world include beans and legumes. And the latest in nutrition science, if you don't include beans and legumes, it's foolish. There's overwhelming evidence to include these foods. All right, one of my favorite points about beans and grains, somebody might say, what about anti-nutrients? What about toxins? Beans and grains have anti-nutrients and toxins, so we need to eat meat instead. We need to eat green veggies instead. Everybody heard of phytic acid, oxalates? These are compounds like phytic acid is found in a lot of whole grains. Oxalates are found in beans. Well, all naturally occurring whole foods contain toxins. So you can't pick one food and say, well, that has a toxin and that one doesn't. All foods, all naturally occurring foods have toxins. You can't escape them. The bummer about animal foods is that as animals eat all the plants to grow, they bioaccumulate all these toxins in their tissues. So then when you eat the meat or the egg, you're getting a concentrated source of these toxins and anti-nutrients. But the real question isn't, can we escape all nutrients or all anti-nutrients and toxins? The question is, what level of anti-nutrient is in the food? Is it at a level that's going to harm our health? Consider those questions. What toxin is in the food? Is it at a level that's going to harm our health? Good news, modern food prep, soaking, sprouting, fermenting, rinsing, cooking, all those things we've evolved to do over the past 10,000 years, they help eliminate all these anti-nutrients and toxins. So it's a non-issue. It's a non-issue. And then again, come back to the idea of triage. The toxins I see that are harming people today with nutrition, I don't have clients that say, Ryan, I'm running into problems with too much phytic acid. No. They run into problems with overconsumption of processed foods, processed sugars, and processed meats. So this graphic shows the real-time slaughter rate of chickens, pigs, and cows in the United States, 2008. You know, what makes me nervous about paleo eating, meat-centric paleo eating, is that when we avoid beans and grains, it's associated with this carnivory. So we avoid beans and grains and our meat consumption goes up and up and up. This is based on 2008 statistics of our meat consumption in this country. If everybody embraces a paleo diet and starts to increase meat consumption, this is just going to go up, higher and higher and higher. So meat-centric eating, no matter if it's pasture-raised or not, or humane or not, grass-fed or not, it dooms more animals to death. The more we learn about our ancestors' diets, the more we learn that they most likely consumed a plant-based diet. Different hunter-gatherer tribes consume between 50 and 100 different plants. Think about that, 50 and 100 different plants they consumed. I can't even name 50 plants. Anthropologists have indicated that our ancestors' diet likely consisted of 15 to 40% animal foods and about 60 to 85% plant foods. So no anthropologist doubts that our ancestors ate meat. They ate meat. And depending on geography and season and opportunity, meat was consumed in varied amounts. But that doesn't make us obligate carnivores. Things have changed. If you were coastal, you ate more fish. You were on the coast. You had access to fish in the water. If you were northern with a short growing season, you probably ate more meat. If you were by the equator and you could grow plants year-round, you probably ate more plants. Times were tough. You ate what you could get your hands on. 10,000 years ago, it didn't matter. Now with modern farming and food transport, you can choose to eat plant-based. Most people can choose to eat plant-based pretty much year-round. Now with all the hunter-gatherer tribes, a lot of different hunter-gatherer tribes, who exactly are we supposed to mimic? You can see that diets varied quite a bit. Anywhere from highly animal-based to more of a highly plant-based diet. We've thrived in various ecosystems consuming various diets. Other data indicates that prehistoric people sometimes ate each other. So keep that in mind. Now, what about this idea that everybody in Paleolithic times was lean, muscular, healthy, had no chronic diseases? Well, we can take a look at a group of modern hunter-gatherers, the Hiwi in Colombia and Venezuela. They're not particularly healthy. They tend to be short, lethargic, less nourished than others. They complain of hunger. Many of them have parasitic hookworms. 50% of the children survive beyond age 15. Not particularly healthy. Other data indicate that atherosclerosis was common in 4 pre-industrial populations, including hunter-gatherers. We commonly assume that atherosclerosis is completely a modern disease, but when we have data like this, there might be some sort of basic predisposition to that illness. Now let's talk a little bit about the environmental impact of different dietary choices. So our food choices have a monumental influence on different things in the environment, right? And one of the biggies is fossil fuel input. So foods require a certain amount of fossil fuel energy to be created. So for every unit of protein, a certain amount of fossil fuel energy is required. So let's look at this chart. For every unit of grain and bean protein, you require 2 units of fossil fuel energy. For every 1 unit of egg protein, it requires 39 units of fossil fuel energy. For every 1 unit of beef protein, it requires 40 units of fossil fuel energy. For every unit of lamb protein, it requires 57 units of fossil fuel energy. As you work your way up the food chain, the environmental cost is greater. And people seem to forget that in order to get animal foods, animals have to eat plants and grow. So we have to grow food to feed them. Livestock consume over 7 times more grain than the entire US human population. If more Americans started eating more animals, we'd have to grow more food to feed these animals. More food for animals, less food for people. Our food choices have a major influence on the amount of water we consume. So let me try to put this in perspective a little bit. So tonight, Sunday night, maybe you had a long weekend, you get to roll in, take a bath. Use about 50 gallons of water. This week, you go to the grocery store, you pick up a pound of sweet potatoes. To grow a pound of sweet potatoes takes about 60 gallons of water. You roll over to Whole Foods next weekend, pick up some hemp seeds. 1 pound of hemp seeds requires about 100 gallons of water. Grab some barley, pound of barley, about 200 gallons of water to grow. 1 pound of steak, about 2,500 gallons of water. That's like taking 50 baths. This will vary a little bit depending on farming methods. Latest figures I've seen, depending on if it's pasture-raised versus factory farmed, anywhere from 1,800 to 2,500 gallons goes into raising an animal. Does everybody understand why it would require a lot more water to get a piece of meat? The animal's going to drink a lot more water. The food that was grown for the animal requires water. So there's a lot of water input going into that animal product. So the diet we choose to sustain us must also sustain the planet. Let me repeat that. The diet we choose to sustain us must also sustain the planet. There are environmental costs to moving up the food chain. Now I'm going to leave you with a few key takeaway points from my talk about paleo eating. So if there's anything you remember, try to remember the next few slides here. First off, remember that idea of triage. The next person to get fat on barley and lentils will be the first. Eliminating these foods is misguided. The more plants displaced by meat in one's diet means a greater likelihood of illness down the road. That's nutrition science. That's what we know about eating. So let me repeat that. The more plants displaced by meat in one's diet means a greater likelihood of illness down the road. One of my favorite quotes related to eating, I try to fit it into almost every presentation I do. One of the greatest opportunities to live our values or betray them lies in the food we put on our plates. So most people know that eating a plant-based diet is a good idea, right? But we often forget why. It's not just about us. It's not just about losing a few pounds or looking better in a tank top. It's about everything. Water, soil, farmers, animals, the planet, everything. Based on everything I know about different diets and the paleo diet and meat-based diets, a meat-centric paleo diet isn't going to help 7 billion of us negotiate a healthy future on this environmentally endangered planet. And really, paleo eating kind of reminds me of a quote as I've learned more about it. The way it never was. It's kind of a good story. It was never really like that. I was reading a Q&A with an anthropologist recently, and he said something that really stuck with me. He said, the paleo diet started off as a reasonable idea. We will try to mimic the diets of our ancestors because we've inherited traits from them that influence our own health. but it's contorted itself into a grain and bean phobic meat cult based on a vision of human evolution that never was. I really think that's true. So as a nutrition coach, I have yet to find one diet that's universally the best for everyone in all situations at all times. But based on my experience and everything I know, more of a plant-based diet seems to be a good idea. So when I'm giving people simple action steps and takeaway steps, this is usually what I like to leave them with. Building a diet around vegetables, fruits, beans, nuts and seeds and whole grains, drinking mostly tea and water for beverages, finding a form of physical activity you enjoy, trying to do it at least 4 hours each week, getting outside in the fresh air and the sun, paying attention to body cues, often forgotten in the world of diets. When people diet, they're looking for rules and regulations. They don't trust any body cues. When are you hungry? When are you not hungry? And some of the best advice I ever received was from Victoria Moran. She said, the best thing you can do for your health is to know yourself. The next best thing you can do for your health is to trust yourself. I'm happy to take any questions about the paleo diet.